Good morning and welcome to the Point. Here's a headline that will not surprise anyone. Michigan's roads are a mess. But what's the problem? Some say we need to spend more than $1 billion a year, every year, more on our roads in order to get them back into shape. In fact, that is at least partially the view of our guest this morning. But what about the way we build roads? What about the weight limits? And why do our roads appear to deteriorate more quickly than other states? We took all of those questions directly to the head of the Michigan Department of Transportation. Here's our conversation. I want to start our conversation by talking a little bit about your background, because sometimes I suspect you feel like the Maytag repairman in reverse, because there's always something for you to fix. But you've been around this a long time, you've been in this department a long time, and you're a lifelong resident of the state of Michigan. So you actually started with the Michigan Department of Transportation in 1987. I
did. I started as an engineer trainee right out of college, a civil engineering graduate. Got an offer to come work for the Department of Transportation, and I said, I'll take it.
I bring that up because that gives you a long history within the department, knowing how things have operated under Democratic governors, under Republican governors, under people who have been brought in from outside to lead the department, or somebody like yourself who has come up through the department. So you have a good idea of what we've been doing with roads over the past several decades. So what have we been doing to them? Because some days when you drive down some of these roads, and in fairness, I should point out, many of the roads that come to mind are surface streets, city streets, much more than freeways that you are more responsible for. But sometimes it appears that we're just not keeping up with our roads. I know there's a funding issue that we're going to talk about, but where are we? I mean, are we building roads like other people do?
You know, that's a great question. Is having grown up in the department, essentially, I have worked for 4 different administrations. I've worked under, I think, 5 different directors, as you pointed out, very different backgrounds. But the engineering behind road building is really a core function of civil engineering. So a lot of people say, well, we just don't build them like they do in pick your favorite state, or, you know, this state can do it, why can't we? Or we don't build them, we should build them like they do in Europe. So there's 2 different, we can talk about both of those. But so the first one, why don't we build them like they do in, you know, Wisconsin or Minnesota, or name your favorite state? Well, actually we do. We use the same asphalt mixes. They're a national standard. Mm-hmm. What we do change is the amount or the type of asphalt that goes in it, because you can imagine an asphalt mix that's used in Texas probably is not going to work in the UP of Michigan. And frankly, the asphalt mix in the Upper Peninsula is not going to work south of Kalamazoo because of the temperature differences. But the general mix is all the same mix across the country. The concrete mixes are similar as well. Frankly, about 10 or 12 years ago, we had some of the worst concrete mixes in the country. We were almost a laughing stock of concrete mixes. Now, through a consortium of other states, we actually are leading the country in the concrete mixes that are going down for durability and strength and longevity. So it's really, the engineering behind it is really very solid. There's lots of background, whether it's in the university setting or in shared practices with other departments. Now, over to the European side, because I get that question a lot. Says, well, you should just build them like the Autobahn, and then they'll last forever. Well, it's 2 things. One, the tax rate on fuel in Europe is it's $8 a gallon, and as opposed to our 18 cents. So that's significantly different. But we actually did a trial on I-94 or I-75 in Detroit, where we built a section just like they do in Europe. So, and this was 1994. We built one direction, same specs they do in Europe. 2 layers of concrete and real deep, and it cost us 4 times more than our standard pavement. The other direction, we put our standard pavement. And again, one cost 4 times more than the other. And then we just let them run. So for the first 16 years, they both performed identically. And then in year 16, we started to see cracks in the European side. 6 months later, we saw cracks in the standard side, the one that cost 25% less. Within 6 months, they both look the same. If you drive through there today, you can't tell the difference between one side or the other. We know that one side cost us 4 times more than the other, and the outcome at the end, almost 20 years later, is the same. So we spent 4 times more. So we tried that. Now, what we've done since then is actually taken the engineering components that are cost effective out of that European design, and that's part of our standard pavement. So the standard pavement we put down for this test, we don't even do anymore, because we've taken a hybrid. So like the bases are probably one of the most important things you can do to a road. So we took what we learned from that European pavement and put it into our standard freeway designs. So that's helped tremendously. And then as we continue to change and evolve the engineering properties within the concrete or asphalt mix, that helps the surface as well.
When you think about it in terms of building roads, I am sometimes astounded. Is there a standard? If I said, what does it cost to either tear up and, on an existing bed and start from scratch to build a mile of freeway? Is there a standard cost that you estimate for that?
Yeah, there really is. I mean, you can do, you can pave about a mile of a 2-lane road for about $1 million.
So $1 million a mile.
Right.
We're talking real money.
Yes. Yeah. And then when you get to a freeway, it's not $1 million a lane. It depends what you're doing. Are you just putting, a surface over the top, or are you totally reconstructing with all the sewers and everything else? Then that's getting to, $10 million a mile. So the costs really add up depending on the repairs that you're doing. And one of the confusions a lot of people have is they see orange barrels out there, and the crews go out and they work, and everybody figure, oh, well, you just fixed that for 30 years. You should never be back. Well, we may have just been out to change the oil and done preventative maintenance on that roadway. And we're going to be back in 3,000 miles to do something else, preventive maintenance. But when we do the full reconstruction, we take everything down, those cases, we're not coming back for quite a while. And frankly, when we get to downtowns, that's one of the pieces we've really moved into small communities, and we try to work with the communities, because we know if we tear out their downtown, it's M whatever going through the little city or village, we're not coming back for 20 years. So we want to leave that city with something they're proud of, not just something that's just got, it's got the basic curbs and away we go through. So we really work closely with them to make sure that it's reflective of that character of that community as well.
How many miles of road are we talking about?
So all told, in the state of Michigan, we have 120,000 miles of roads. Now, if you break it down to from kind of the backbones of it, so the freeways, the U.S., the interstates, the U.S. and the M routes, those are called the state trunk lines. That's about 10,000 miles. And then you add in the county primary roads. Everybody will know those when they drive on them, right? And the city major streets. That group totals about 40,000 lane miles total. And that group is what carries the backbone of Michigan's economy. That's what moves the goods around the state. About 99% of the commercial traffic is on that network. So then you have 60 or about 80,000 miles more of local roads, subdivision streets, alleys, 2-lane tracks that are going out in the country.
When you consider, just let's talk about the basic, where you say the commerce moves. When you look at those roads, the freeways and the U.S. highways, the M roads, and some of those major county roads, and they're not just roads, we should point out, they're also bridges that are in there, which also are a significant issue. In fact, at least one group has got some billboards up around the state saying, hey, we've got a lot of deficient bridges. We'll get to that in a minute. But in general, when you look at that basic backbone of the state's transportation system, what condition are our roads and bridges in?
So there's an asset management council that's charged with taking actual data on that segment of the state's network. So it's the state's plus the county and the city major streets. And so they rate them all as good, fair, and poor. And they've been doing it since 2004. They have actual data. And it's not rocket science. The percentages of goods are going down, percentages of fair roads are going down, and the percentage of poor roads is going up quite dramatically. I mean, we're at about 30%, that if you take that whole group that is in poor condition. When we say poor, it's really bad.
And when you look at those roads, once they become, and I know, and to be sure, I, as a reporter, do not have a dog in the hunt when it comes to funding. Those are decisions that are going to have to be made by the people of Michigan, perhaps, certainly the legislature. But when you look at a road that is in poor condition, and now you are given the ability, that is, given the money to fix it, as a percentile, how much more expensive is it to fix a road from poor condition to get it back up to shape than it would be to take a road that is in fair condition, for example, and get it back up to shape?
You know, that is a great question, and frankly, I'll take it one step further. What we try to do is keep good roads in good condition. So you continue to do the preventative maintenance. That's we're out there and we're going to come back every 3,000 miles, right, and fix and keep it in good condition. So the ones that are the most critical are the ones that are fair, because if it's poor, there isn't anything left to do other than a total reconstruction. So it's going to cost you, I'm going to just give you a percentage here, $6 or $7 to reconstruct this roadway. No matter when you get there, that's what the fix is going to be. The ones that are fair, they're kind of having the midlife crisis, right? They can have some intervention and you can do some treatments to them and you can push them back to the good category. They still have some life left in them. It's not economically the most prudent to just reconstruct everything, because you've already paid for this asset. If you just do a couple more things to it, you can move that asset for another 8 or 10 or 15 years. So those are the ones that are critical. If you don't catch those at the right time and they fall into poor, then there is nothing left to do. So this midlife crisis one, that's going to be in the $1 to $2 range instead of the $6 to $10 range. So you can save a significant amount of money if you work on roads before they're poor. Once they get to poor, there's nothing left to do than to tear it all back up again and redo it.
Director Steudle has much more to say about the roads here in Michigan, and also more to say about how we would finance the repair that they need. All that when we return to the Point. Welcome back to the Point. We're talking about Michigan roads with the director of the Michigan Department of Transportation. Now, it's no secret that Michigan has some very bad roads, bridges too, but the real question is, how do you fix that? How much does it cost? And if it does cost $1 billion or more extra each year, where does that money come from? More of our conversation now with Director Steudle. We talked a little bit about why don't you build roads like everybody else does. You gave us your explanation of that. So then here's another one of the often asked questions that I get. Why do we let those big trucks carry so much weight on these roads? Because if you'd reduce the amount of weight or the amount of trailers that they pull or the amount of axles that are on them, right, the roads wouldn't wear out as fast.
Yeah, that is another great question. And we've actually done quite a bit of analysis of that and said, okay, well, how many of the 10,000 trucks that are on the road, there's 100,000 trucks on the road, how many of them are actually able to carry more than 80,000 pounds? And the number is about 6%. So, to most viewers, they see a semi and they go, well, that truck is overweight, when in fact, if it's a typical 18-wheeler, it's got 2 wheels on the trailer, that truck can drive anywhere in the country. That one can hold less than 80,000 pounds. That's not a big deal. It typically is a gravel train, a grain hauler, a milk truck, a log hauler. So it's a lot of our big industries. And so if the viewers think about, if the truck passes them, it's got multiple axles, okay, that one is capable of carrying more than 80,000 pounds. Now, when we look at some of the local city streets, like College Avenue right in front of here, well, a log truck's never gone down here. That 6% of the population of trucks that are more than 80,000 pounds have never been on that street. Then why is that falling apart? It's falling apart because we haven't been maintaining it over its entire life. So yes, those heavier trucks do more damage, but from a state trunk line perspective, the freeway perspective, we actually design for all of that weight, and we actually require them to put all those axles because it's less weight per axle. So instead of, we allow most states 18,000 tons on each axle. Michigan, when you go over the 80,000 pounds, you got to reduce that to 13,000 or 13 tons per axle. So if you just think about that, what did your parents tell you when you were out on a pond and it's November and you hear a crack? Lay down and spread the weight out. So that is an issue. We do know that there's more weight, but it's not proportional to say the trucks are doing all the damage. So frankly, what the damage is coming from is multiple decades worth of underinvestment. That really is the crux here. Right now we're seeing this massive breakup of roadways. Well, if all of those pavements were a little bit more structurally sound, meaning we've done things to them over the last 10 or 20 years, they would have been able to withstand this winter. But because they are fragile, this hard winter is going to blow them apart, and that's what it's doing right now.
This may be the stupidest question that you as an engineer have ever heard, but it just dawned on me as you were talking about weight. Does speed play any factor in the wear on our surfaces, because we do have somewhat liberal speed limits within the state of Michigan. By the way, I'm not advocating to change those, but does that have any impact, or is that just negligible?
So the only place where speed plays a factor is where you have a rough road, right? Because then you get a tire that bounces and up and down. So you have this impact, and the impact load is what will damage a road. So you can just think about it. As you drive around, you'll see a pavement joint that is tinted up or something, and then you'll see it grow and grow and grow. Well, it's growing for multiple reasons. One, that's freezing and thawing. It's doing this. The second one is the tire is going up and coming down. It's just like hitting it with a hammer. So if it's all nice and smooth, the tire never bounces and that weight gets distributed evenly. So absolutely it does.
All right, let's talk about the brass tacks. The Michigan Department of Transportation has, for an overall budget, how much money?
It's about $3.4 billion, but that includes all the money that goes to cities and counties as well. So that's all transportation across all 83 counties.
And that's under the 51 formula, so
Yep.
so that's about 31.9%.
Yep, 39.1% goes to
39.1%.
MDOT, and then 39.1% goes to counties for county roads, and then 22.8% goes to cities for city streets, and that's what's called the Act 51 formula. That's gas taxes and registration fees. That's the money that comes in. That's how it gets distributed back to everybody.
And that formula is what's used for most of the money that gets distributed. Recently, the legislature passed a supplemental in which another $100 million would be distributed. It will follow that same formula. So local municipalities get a little smaller amount, right, and then the rest goes to the road commissions and to MDOT.
So we have 620 agencies that are on that list. So if you just think about 620 agencies, and you're going to put $100 million in it, and you're going to break it apart, there actually are agencies on there that receive less than $1,000.
And to give you an idea, and I hope I get these numbers pretty close to right, Kent County has about a $50 million budget, and they'll get less than $2 million additional money. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the percentages are. Not that it won't be used well, and not that it isn't needed, but $100 million sounds like a lot of money to me, but when you start looking at all the roads in the state of Michigan, it isn't a great deal of money. Now, with that, in addition to taking care of the roads, some of that money is used to keep snow off the roads, I assume.
Well, actually, so what was just passed in the supplemental was two pieces. One, there was $100 million that's going to go through that formula for maintenance covering this winter. This winter has been very vicious on all of us, but also on our budgets, our maintenance budgets. So, we've spent more money in salt, more money in fuel and sand and overtime and all the rest of it to keep all the roads clear and keep everybody moving. So that's priority number one. But what we're doing is in order to do that, you're taking the money out of the spring that's there for filling potholes. So right now we're filling potholes, but we're taking the money out of the summer. So it's pretty much gone. So the $100 million of that is going back into all of those public agencies to help them with the severe winter that we had. That puts money back into their maintenance budget so they can actually pick up the trash. Something as fundamental as that, or mowing the grass this summer. So that's $100 million, and then the legislature put in another $115 million for special projects across the state.
And when we say special projects, and I don't want to take you too far out in the weeds, but you got 110 members in the House and you got 38 members over in the Senate, and they all have roads they want fixed. So when you get that kind of money in there, there are obviously some priorities that are directed by people who work with that on a regular basis. So let's talk about moving forward. The governor has asked repeatedly for $1 billion or more additional, in addition to what you're already talking about, $3.4 billion every year for a decade. Now, you've already addressed some of this because you talk about decades of neglect.
Right.
That $1 billion would be used how? By the same formula, or directed by the 110 plus 38, or a combination of the two? How would that work?
Well, clearly, the 110 plus 38 have an opinion as to how that ought to be distributed. But we have the formula, this Act 51 formula, that's been established, and it's been in place for 60 plus years. Many could argue that maybe that formula needs to change, but that's going to change within the legislature, and that's going to be a very arduous process. So for expedient purposes, it probably needs to go through the existing formula because we have immediate needs right now, and every agency has those needs. If we go back to when the gas tax was raised in 1997, the conversation at the time was the number really needed to be about 10 cents, maybe 11 cents. That's what we really needed to raise it, and it got raised 4. And then unfortunately, we then pretended it was 10 or 12 because we bonded for a bunch of things. We built a lot of great projects all over the state that needed to be done, but we're still paying for those. I have $230 million of my budget every year goes to pay debt service on projects that we built 15 years ago. We're still paying that, and we're going to pay it for another 15 years. So if we even take this conversation back to 1997, we put 4 cents in, it wasn't enough. We spent it on really needed projects, but not recognizing the fact that we've got this maintenance piece that we've got to just take care of. But frankly, in 1997, I don't want to place a lot of blame on them. They didn't have the tools that we have today. We have a lot more sophisticated computer models that help us predict what 5 years from now is going to look like based on certain funding scenarios and certain mixes of reconstructions and rehabilitations and preventative maintenance that they didn't have then. They were doing it on a paper spreadsheet.
Sure.
Said, okay, this ought to work.
Well, and to give you another perspective, in 1997, people were howling about the roads. I was in an
They're just
event
about there.
with a state senator and Governor Engler, and we were at an event, and I went to the governor and I said, "Are the roads the worst you've ever seen them?" And he said, "No, I don't think they're the worst I've ever seen them." He goes, "I think the media is making too much out of this," which was not an untypical John Engler answer. And the state senator of the same party, when I asked him, he said, "Oh, it's the worst I've ever seen them." They were standing within 10 feet of each other. So there was a big disconnect. That was Build Michigan 2 that you speak of,
right,
when they came up with that 4 cents. So now this governor is looking at potentially $1 billion more a year for 10 years. And that is going to demand, if it happens, either a new revenue source or some serious shifting in current revenues. I know you don't get a vote on those kind of things. So as you look at it, and no doubt you talk to legislators about it, and I know you talk within the administration, how realistic is it that at some point in the relative short period of time, and let's take that from now till the end of the year, that something could be done to get 19 votes over in the Senate and 56 over in the House that would come up with that kind of funding?
My conversations with legislators, I think they all recognize that we have to deal with this problem. I'm not encountering really anybody anymore that says, "Oh, that's really not happening." I think what I'm hearing more often is, "Wow, I guess what you said was going to happen is happening," which we predicted this spring breakup, not this one, but this is what was going to happen, and they've started to realize we have to maintain this. So I think I'm not confronting any more conversation says, "Oh, you really don't need that." Now it is, okay, well, how do we get there? And I think that's the important shift. Now, how do we get there? It's going to be a big pill to swallow, but frankly, the longer we wait, the pill gets bigger. If we'd have done this 2.5 years ago when Governor Snyder said, "Hey, we need to fix this problem," we would have saved $100 million. By delaying a year, it's cost us $100 million more in deterioration. So we can continue to wait, which is really what the governor said. We can stick our head in the sand and not do this. The number will never get smaller. In fact, the number is going to grow exponentially. And you get 8 years, 10 years from now, and it's going to be $25 billion to rebuild everything that if we'd have spent $10 billion, we could have kept it there.
So there are some of the problems and maybe even a potential fix, but there are other potential solutions too. Just this week, Speaker of the House Jace Bolger talked about how he might try to at least partially fund road repairs. You'll hear some of that conversation when we return to the point. Before we leave this morning, a quick note from the Speaker of the House, Jace Bolger. This week, he introduced what he says is a new plan that would help at least partially fund the roads. Only about $500 million, leaving several $100 million left over, at least from what the governor would like to have to work on those roads. But here's some of what he says about his new proposal.
I think it is time to put forward an ongoing solution, that better base, that better foundation in which a further solution can be built upon. But let's make sure we're doing everything we can with our current resources. That's what this proposal does.
The question about what to do with our roads in Michigan will continue to be a tough one for the folks in Lansing to wrestle with. How to pay for any repairs, also a big question, and something that we will continue to follow. I hope you'll join us right here every Sunday morning when we talk about that and other issues important to you. To the point.